One evening, I was sitting alone in my room, reading, when I heard steps on the veranda, and soon a knock. I went to the door and saw a Brahmin gentleman. I asked him if I could do anything for him. "Oh, yes, Amma," he said. "I so need your help. My wife is dying in childbirth, and Amma, she is such a lovely girl. I heard that you'd come to India, and I thought you could help her." But I replied, "I know nothing about childbirth, but my father is a doctor, and I can bring him. He can save your little wife." Almost in horror, he raised his hands, saying, "I could not take a man into my house. No man can look upon my wife. If you cannot come, she must die." He left, and I sat down at my desk, feeling desperate. After some time, I heard footsteps. I ran to the door, thinking that the Brahmin had returned. Instead, there stood a Mohammedan, and with the same request. He too turned away, repeating the same words, "Oh, she must die." I felt I could not bear it, and again I heard footsteps in the same evening. Similar requests came from a third man. There was no sleep for me that night. I could not forget those 3 young women dying in childbirth when I could not help them. By morning, my decision was made. I could go to America, study medicine, and return to India as a doctor to try to save the lives of those who needed me.
In the space of one night, a young woman had made a life-changing decision. It was an act of faith, and she remained true to that call for the rest of her life. After graduating from Cornell University, Dr. Ida Scudder arrived in Vellore on the first day of the 20th century. Dr. Ida was determined to make a difference to the lives of the sick and poor in the region of India that had been her childhood home. Soon, there was a small single-bed dispensary, and then a few huts for inpatients. Within 2 years, Ida Scudder had set up the Mary Tabor Shell Memorial Hospital. But the pressures for the young doctor were huge. Life for the poor in India during this time was extremely difficult. It is not surprising that life expectancy was as short as 25 years. Ida soon realized the need to take her services out into the surrounding countryside. In 1906, the first roadside dispensary began. This dispensary was little more than a rickety wagon pulled by a bullock. These rural missions continue today through the work of CMC's community outreach departments and the trained and dedicated staff CMC has sent to many parts of India. Early on, Ida recognized that training local medical staff would be just as important as her clinical work. In 1909, Ida started a nursing course. Initially, it was a struggle to recruit students. Few families were willing to educate their girls, and even fewer willing to let them nurse. But the staff persevered, persuading families to send their daughters to Vellore School of Nursing.
Sister Anna Jacob, she's 100 years old and came to CMC in our first batch of diploma nursing. Sister Anna, can you remember the first time you met Aunt Ida?
Oh, she was like a mother. I remember her in her blue dress and her blue eyes came and welcomed us when we first went to the hospital. And she said, "Well, I'm sure we all will work together and build God's kingdom."
By 1918, Ida Scudder was training young women as physicians. Through her own example and by establishing the training of women as doctors and nurses, Ida Scudder contributed significantly to advancing the equality of women in Indian society. In 1928, a 267-bed teaching hospital was opened on the site of the present CMC. In 1932, the medical school was moved to the College Hill campus at Bagayam. It was here, a little more than a decade later, that the doctor's diploma course would be upgraded to the MBBS degree of university standard. In 1947, the year India became independent, the first men medical students were admitted to what was now called the Christian Medical College, Vellore. Dr. P. Zachariah joined the MBBS course in 1949.
As the reputation of the institution increased, CMC was able to generate its own resources. There was a homegrown professional workforce, there was an Indian governing body, and there were Indian resources to keep CMC sustainable and to continue developing.
The 1950s and 60s was a time of great building in Vellore. The hospital and the college continued to expand. Postgraduate residency programs started. The infrastructure and human resources developed in this period still serve CMC's work today. CMC's international impact through research began with the work of Dr. Paul Brand, a British missionary surgeon. Leprosy was endemic in South India, and it was in the crippled hands of a person with leprosy that Paul Brand found the research challenge that would engage him for the rest of his life. He developed reconstructive surgery for leprosy, the first in the world. After surgery, crippled hands could move and learn a trade. Paul Brand then went on to change the world's understanding of why leprosy patients' fingers fell off. Not because of rotten flesh, as experts had taught, but because leprosy had destroyed the ability to feel pain. Based on the paradox that he called the gift of pain, he developed methods to protect painless limbs. This had an impact far beyond leprosy, preventing amputation in diseases like diabetes that affect millions of people around the world.
We need those who can take up the torch of life and carry on and make Vellore Medical College one of the outstanding medical institutions in the world. We need your love and prayers and help as never before.
After its Golden Jubilee, CMC went on to deliver a string of Indian and international firsts. These included the first Neurological Sciences Department in South Asia, the first middle-ear microsurgery, and India's first successful open-heart surgery. Now established as a world-class centre for healing, education and research, CMC's training programs were delivering the finest homegrown doctors, nurses and allied health workers in India. Mary Verghese graduated as a doctor in 1952 and had decided to specialise in obstetrics and gynecology. But this was not to be. In 1954, a holiday outing for a group of young doctors turned to tragedy when the vehicle they were travelling in flipped 3 times. Whilst the other passengers would recover, Mary had shattered her spine, leaving her paralysed and dependent on others to meet her daily needs. It was a terrible time for the young doctor. Her career prospects appeared as broken as her body. But encouraged by Dr. Paul Brand, she eventually began working in reconstructive surgery, operating on patients' hands from her wheelchair. Mary travelled to Australia for rehabilitation. It was here that she first had the idea of bringing rehabilitation to India. It took over a decade, but in 1966, Mary's dream became a reality when CMC opened the Rehabilitation Institute, the first of its kind in India.
Here we are trying to continue the good work that she started, and her life is definitely a great inspiration for me and all the team.
As CMC moved towards its centenary, then into the new millennium, the college continued to touch more lives. Another of CMC's significant contributions to world health came in the field of polio eradication. Just 20 years ago, up to 1,000 children were being crippled by the disease in India every day. Vellore became the first polio-free town in the country. This was due to the work of virologist Dr. Jacob John and his team, who created and executed new responses on both clinical and strategic fronts. Their work was taken up right across the country, and by 2011, polio had declined dramatically in India. Now this work is being taken to the world, aiming for global eradication.
This is Anandan with polio that affected him 25 years ago. Look at all his limbs are paralyzed, joints are deformed. Imagine his life for the last 25 years. He has been wheelchair bound, couldn't go to school, he has to be helped by others all the time. All this is due to one disease, polio, which could have been prevented. The history is actually projecting itself into the future. So we need to know how we came here, what brought us here, what is important in our lives, so that we will know what is important in our future.
Knowing our story allows us to trust our journey into the future. As Ida said, towards the end of her life, I took only one step at a time, the step God showed me.